If you're serious about getting into primer reloading, at some point you probably repurpose or obtain a set of tools similar to these. These are currently manufactured by a company called NOE bullet molds. The original idea and design was made by Adrian Jackson. Adrian is a well-respected member and can be found in the MeWe group called Primer Reloading. Here's a screenshot of NOE's bullet molds website. What the owner, Al Nelson, is telling us is that he's retiring and his company appears to be closing, and therefore production of this tool and die set will no longer be available once the current inventory has been depleted. Today's date is September the 9th, 2025, and the current inventory level is down to 11 sets. It is advisable to purchase a set of these dies if you have an interest in reloading primers. This tool set is not required to reload primers, but the advantages of owning a set will be covered in this video. Essentially, this punch and die set resizes the primer cups and removes the firing pin dent. This punch and die set makes quick work of not only flattening the primer dent, but it resizes the primer cup back to round again. These primer cups must have been de-anviled prior to this operation. We coined the phrase de-dimple when you knock out the primer dent. By the way, they call this part of the die kit the anvil as well. This particular toolkit is compatible with most any single stage press that utilizes the standard T-slot shell holder, but you need to remove the die and replace it with the NOE's anvil, and you remove the shell holder and replace it with the punch. Although not initially or readily apparent, the die itself is not symmetrical, and you should always locate the entrance and exit end of the die before use. You can identify the exit end, or where the primer cups come out, by glancing down the throat of the die about 1/8 of an inch down, and you'll observe the relief cut. This will always be the primer cup exit end. To resize, merely set a primer on the punch and set the die on top, making sure that the label of the die is facing down in this case. The primer will stop somewhere in the middle of the die depending on the deformation of the cup. It's actually a light stroke to force the primer through the resizing die, but the cup will be back to round. Here's where the NOE anvil comes into play. Install it anywhere that's comfortable to simply press the dimple out of the cup. Merely continue with your stroke to force the primer into the anvil's depression. Usually one press is all that it takes to remove a dimple, but you may elect to retract the ram, perhaps even turn the cup, say 90 degrees, and repressing in this manner will all but remove any evidence of a dimple. There's nothing to say that you can't take that anvil and screw it into your press upside down. This allows you to press up against the flat side of the anvil. You can even change the profile of the punch. What we can control by making these changes is the distance between the nose of the anvil and the bottom of the primer cup. The professional engineers in the industry call this gap the bridge distance, but we usually just refer to it as the pinch gap. The thinking is if you dome the cup a little bit, you increase the pinch gap by a few thousandths and therefore get a little bit more powder in that gap. We have found that resized or rounded primer cups usually accept the corresponding anvils more readily than non-resized cups, and that the resized cups more readily or easily reinstall into the primer pockets more consistently without too many hang-ups, and this consistency reflects in fewer FTFs or failure to fires. So it's worth it to resize. Flat or rounded primer cups is a matter of personal preference. I usually use the NOE primer sizer as a resizer only, and I still prefer to strike my primer cups flat in a separate task or process. The choice will be yours. By the by, this is the same NOE die set that's featured in the tutorial called the Primer Pro Deluxe. The description or the link to that video will be in the description down below. On behalf of the primer reloading community, I'd like to personally thank you, Al, for your interest in our endeavors. I recognize you didn't have to do this, and in fact took a big financial risk to manufacture this product. You have my thanks, and I hope this video helps clear your shelves of any remaining inventory, not only in the primer reloading die set, but perhaps in the selling of your remaining bullet mold inventory as well. I wish you well in your new endeavors and retirement. This is Mark on aardvarkreloading.com. We are growing. We now have 3 MeWe groups in which to choose, a primer library to help keep track of the information, and now a Microsoft Teams area to meet virtually. Making several hundred primers in an afternoon is not only possible, it's becoming more and more routine.